let's talk about once that receptor is stimulated and that impulse is initiated, what happens to it? Where does it go? How do we feel the things that we feel? So the pathway is you have a receptor, then you have an impulse that goes through a sensory, the receptor goes through a sensory neuron, and then ends up at the primary somatosensory area in the cerebral cortex. Where is the primary somatosensory area of the cerebral cortex? We learned that in the last unit. It was the post-central gyrus in the cortex. What? Was motor, right? So this is the post-central gyrus of the cortex. Okay, so that pathway from sensory receptor all the way up to the post-central gyrus, that somatosensory area in the cortex, involves three neurons. You have a first order neuron, you have a second order neuron, and then your final neuron will be your third order neuron. Okay, so I'm telling you, you have three neurons that carry this impulse from receptor to the cortex. Let's talk about those neurons, okay? Your first order neuron is going to go from receptor to the spinal cord. Your second order neuron is going to go from the spinal cord to the thalamus. Why the thalamus? Because we learned in the last unit that the thalamus is what? The major sensory relay center, right? So we already knew that. So it goes to the thalamus with the second order neuron, then the thalamus gets to send it where it needs to be. So your third order neuron goes from the thalamus to your somatosensory area in the cortex, your post-central gyrus of the cerebral cortex. And then just as a reminder, I've posted the little picture here of how your entire body is mapped out. So you know that all the sensations of your foot and leg will be on that central portion of that gyrus. Cool. Please enlighten us some more. Yes, absolutely. So your somatic sensory pathway, three neurons, first order, second order, third order. The first order goes from the receptor to the spinal cord or brainstem. The second order goes from that spinal cord or brainstem to the thalamus. The third order goes from the thalamus to the primary somatosensory area. Good deal. So we're going to do special senses today. Hopefully we'll get through most of it and have maybe like one or two slides at the end. We may not. I have super condensed the special senses, okay? Actually, I've condensed the entire unit, trying to keep it down to basics. It's a lot of interesting stuff, and I probably could go on and on for, you know, a week on each one, especially things like vision and our eyesight. We could talk a lot about, but I'm not going to do that because we don't have that time. We don't need to go into that depth. But if you are curious, there is a lot of information in your textbook. I recommend that you go and read it. And then if you have any questions, come back and ask me. I'm not saying that I'm going to test you on what's in the textbook. Relax. I'm just saying if you're curious and you want to know more, that's a good source to read up on stuff that interests you. Okay? And it's obvious right now that nobody in this classroom, I can't see Zoom, but nobody that I can see
It's
now
hard for us to hear on Zoom.
and reading anything. Do what?
It's hard to hear for us on Zoom.
Oh, is it better this way?
Not really.
It's not better?
It's a little better. It'll work.
Yeah.
Okay. You said the magic words, it'll work. Because I was just about to be like, okay, we don't need to have class. Let's just cancel. I don't know what it is about this room. It does not like me. Let me see if I have a sound setting that I can fix or something. Let me just make sure it's not pulling sound from somewhere else. Do what? Over the green part? Oh, you're so smart. Just so smart. Yeah, it's on the right microphone. Speakers. Okay. Well, I'll try to speak loudly. I think it depends on what I'm wearing too, because it ends up rubbing on something and you can never hear me. Is that all right?
It'll work.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to start with the sense of smell, which happens to be named olfaction. Olfaction, that is the sense of smell. Remember the olfactory nerve, olfactory bulb, all that had to do with our sense of smell. So really cool to know that the sense of smell is actually a chemical sense. What does that mean, that it's a chemical sense? It means that whenever you smell something, it is actually a molecule that is dispersed in the air that is reacting chemically with the olfactory receptor cells in your nasal mucosa. Yes, it is that gross. That means when you walk into the bathroom and it smells like poop, there are molecules in the air dispersed that are interacting chemically with the olfactory receptor cells in your nose that give you that sensation of smelling poop. You will never smell anything the same again. Just saying. I know. It freaks me out. Okay. Anyways, our nose contains 10 to 100 million receptors for smell. We call them olfactory receptors or olfactory cells. They are in the nasal cavity, in that epithelium, the superior part, the very top part of that nasal cavity. They're also found on the inferior part of the cribriform plate. What is the cribriform plate? What's cribriform plate? The ethmoid bone, right, from AMP1 that had all the holes in it. That was the cribriform plate. Very good. Okay. So all of that nasal mucosa and that tissue covering the cribriform plate contains those olfactory receptors that are able to chemically interact with molecules in the air to transmit an impulse that will travel up through that cribriform plate into your brain to be interpreted as a smell. Let's talk about, what am I doing here? Come on. Okay. So the pathway of this, you have your receptors in the mucosa. They are going to, here's up through, here's your olfactory epithelium, going through that cribriform plate, olfactory bulb, then olfactory tract. That eventually is the olfactory nerve into your cerebral cortex, where you will have interpretation in the primary olfactory area of your cortex, which happens to be in the temporal lobe. Okay? Yeah, nobody cares at this point. All right, let's just keep going. 3 types of cell involved in this sensation. You have your main olfactory receptor cells, and these are actually bipolar sensory neurons. Do you guys remember what sensory neurons look like with the cell body and the 2 arms? Yeah. So that's what these are. They are just specialized in picking up or chemically reacting with molecules in the air. And they have little hairs or cilia at the end. And those cilias are the ones that will actually pick up on those molecules. And then we have supporting cells, which really just kind of sit around these olfactory cells and help support them, not just physically by giving them something to lean on, they also help supply nourishment and nutrients. And then we have some basal cells, and basal cells are basically your olfactory stem cells. Whenever you have an olfactory receptor cell that is damaged or is dying, it can be replaced with those basal cells. Okay, so 3 types of cells: your main olfactory receptor cell, supportive cells, and then your basal cells. Cool? Y'all need to wake up, man. Getting no feedback here. Okay, so here's a pretty little microscopic image of that. Not too much to worry about. It's kind of cool, though, to see how those olfactory cilia will actually stick out of the surface of that mucosa so that they can catch all of those odorant molecules in the air, such as, you know, what you're having for lunch, or if you happen to go into the bathroom, whatever's lingering in there. And here you see some of those supporting cells down here. And then you've got your basal cells, which are the ones that can replace these olfactory cells over here. Okay, right on to gustation. Gustation is the sense of taste. Again, this also is a chemical sensation, meaning that the anytime you taste something, it's actually molecules that are interacting chemically with your taste receptors inside of your taste buds. Okay, so smell and taste are both chemical senses. We've got 5 primary tastes: sour, sweet, bitter, salty, and umami. What the heck is umami? This is where I get to tell you a story. Okay, I know y'all love my stories, don't you? Sure you do. So, and I just reminded myself of my Spanish teacher in high school. Yes, I went to Mosley, but I graduated like way before any of y'all were ever born. For real, 1990, Mosley class of 1990, and I took Spanish for 2 years because I was forced to by the state. I don't know if they still force them or not, but in my days, you had to take a foreign language for 2 years. And so I took Spanish, and my Spanish teacher was really introverted, quiet. Like I could see her living on a farm somewhere by herself, but she was a military wife, and she was lonely, and she always had stories she wanted to tell. And as teenagers do, everybody just rolled their eyes and never listened and made fun of her. And I was the one person that said that, I don't know, well, I probably did it just to get a good grade, but I was the one person that would sit there and pretend to listen to all of her stupid stories, right? And you know what? I got an A, and it was not by effort either. She was very generous when she graded my test. So y'all just be nice and listen to my stories and pretend they're interesting, and it'll be all right. No, because this isn't high school. It doesn't work like that. That's high school where you can bring in gifts for the teacher. Now, I did think about, I know I told my morning class that I was actually considering turning that glass jar into a tip jar because girl needs some cash. And I'm thinking maybe a little tip jar here would help out. Maybe then, I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, no. But I mean, it helped me through Spanish. I don't know a word of Spanish. I know hola, and that's only because after the hurricane, the guy helping to fix my house, they were all Hispanic, and you know, the good morning was hola, and so that's the one word I know, hola, and mas and no mas. So that's it. After 2 years of the language, I'm so bad. I learned nothing. Anyways, that was not my story, and I forgot my story already. Oh yeah, my story about umami. Okay. So I used to captain a tennis team that played during the week, daytime, right? And so whenever we had home matches, we had to have snacks. And our snack list, you know, it was the captain's job to give everybody their snack assignment. So every week I would tell them, you know, okay, you have salty, you have sweet, you have drinks, you have savory. I inherited the list. I didn't make it up. It just was handed over to me by the previous captain. And every single week, I would get a text the night before from the person that had savory. And they'd be like, what is savory? Yeah, and then I'm thinking in my head, I don't know. I don't know what savory is. So I had to make stuff up. And I'd be like, savory is like salty food. And they're like, well, what's salty? Savory is salty food. Okay, so salty is like, you know, chips, nuts, just something light and salty. Savory is like chicken salad sandwiches or deviled eggs. It's like food. It's got a little more substance to it. And so I actually made that up, but it turns out it is kind of true. But I always remember that because when it says umami, it says that it's savory. And then again, there's that question of what is savory, right? Okay, so somebody can look up savory and tell me. Either way, that's our last taste is umami. They added that one, woo! They added that one recently, actually. It used to only be sweet, sour, bitter, and salty, and then they added umami later on just because it wasn't complicated enough or whatever. I don't know. Really? Okay. Oh, everyone says, yeah, like you knew it was there, but you didn't want to say anything. I do. I have 2 chats. Okay, Jennifer can hear. Awesome. Thanks, Robert. They confirmed that they can hear. So the point is that, yes, these are the 5 primary tastes, but in reality, everything we taste is usually a mixture of that. Nothing is purely salty or purely sweet. It's usually a mix of salty, sweet, bitter, and umami. Okay? Yes, okay. All right. So how do we taste? Well, we taste with taste buds. How many taste buds do we have? 10,000 taste buds on the average adult tongue. 10,000 taste buds. Where are they? They are on the tongue, on the soft palate. Remember, when you probe all the way back where there's no bone, that's your soft palate, the pharynx, and the epiglottis. Where was the epiglottis? So that's from A&P1. And no, it's not that thing, that the little dangly dang in the back of my throat. That's not your, that's your uvula. What? Sorry, I have a song in my head right now. Tell me what you're saying. I shouldn't have said that because my mind went totally somewhere else. What, Erica?
The opening of your throat.
So the epiglottis was that beak-looking thing that closed off the glottis, which was the opening to the trachea. Yeah, so we actually have taste buds on that epiglottis. So epiglottis, pharynx, I know, right? Soft palate, and obviously the main one is the tongue, but not everywhere on the tongue, and we're going to learn where in a minute. We have 3 types of cells. Again, basically the same idea. You have your main receptor cell, which is your gustatory receptor cells. Then you have your supporting cells, and then your basal stem cells, which will be able to regenerate and replace those receptor cells if they need to. Okay? And I don't know why those are in that order. Well, they're basal because they're actually on the innermost layers. Oh. Yeah, but you got basal cells in the olfactory. We have basal cells everywhere, really. Okay, so this is what a typical taste bud would look like. It's made up of the different cells. There's those basal cells that are there to replace your receptors if they go bad. Here are your receptor cells. Notice they have little hairs on the very end of them. Those are actually microvilli. They're not cilia like they were in the nose. This is a bigger projection of the cytoplasm. They're called microvilli. And those are the parts that will make that initial contact with the molecules of the foods that we eat, and then get that chemical interaction to have that action potential and fire off that signal. And then you have your supporting cells dispersed around, helping support those. So that's what a typical taste bud looks like. Please keep in mind, it's not the taste bud itself that is the receptor. It is the cells within the taste bud, those gustatory receptor cells inside of a taste bud that actually do the chemical reaction. Okay? Nobody cares. Okay, so we know that the taste buds contain the receptor cells. Where are they found? Well, they're found on bumps on our tongue called papillae, and certain papillae, not your common everyday papillae. Okay, we have valate papillae. There's about 12 of them on the back of the tongue over here. 4, and 4 more. We've got fungiform papillae. Those are the ones that are on the main surface of your tongue, but a little bit bigger. They're named after mushrooms. So they look like little mushroom papillae, and these are your fungiform papillae. Those also will have taste buds in them. And then your foliate papillae on the sides of the tongue here and there. That is where our taste buds are. Okay? Cool. It's funny when you think about it, though, because like you've got a lot of taste buds towards the back, right? And then the rest are just kind of dispersed out here. And yet, when we give medicine to kids or to dogs, we'll shove it in the back. Like, you think that if you put it on the tip of their tongue, they'll taste it and spit it out. But in reality, they've got more taste buds back there, right? So the papillae themselves with the taste buds, those will change with age on their own. But when you have a baby or when you're pregnant, it's the hormones that alter your perception of the sensation, not the actual taste buds themselves changing. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, and that's a very common thing. You could maybe, love French fries, and then once you're pregnant, you can no longer stand the smell or the taste of French fries. It's not because your taste buds changed, it's the perception in your cortex that changed. Because remember, we talked about how senses are not only the sensation, but also the perception of that sensation, which again blows my mind because that means that no two people ever really feel or smell or taste anything identical, because it's all about your cortex. All right, moving on to vision. Y'all ready to do this? We're moving too fast. Do I need to add more stories?